Hello again. Paul in Athens, according to John Stott's book, The Spirit, the Church, and the World, the Message of Acts. We've seen what Paul saw in Athens, idolatry, what he felt, which was great disturbance of spirit because of being a sensitive Jew and knowing what God said about idolatry, the jealousy of the true God, and what Paul did in his three methods in Athens of reaching people. First the synagogue, then the public square, and now the Areopagus, which might be the equivalent of the university in the modern world. What Paul said. Paul's evangelistic dialogue with Jews, God-fearers, passers-by, and philosophers may well have continued for many days. It led to one of the greatest opportunities of his whole ministry, the presentation of the gospel to the world-famous Supreme Council of Athens, the Areopagus. How did this come about? The Epicurean and Stoic philosophers reacted to Paul's message in two ways. Some of them insulted him. They asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Babbler translates spermologos, which Ramsay calls a word of characteristically Athenian slang. Its literal meaning is a seed picker, and it was used of various seed-eating or scavenging birds. The rook, for instance, in Aristophanes' comedy, The Birds. Hence, Hence, the suggested rendering cock sparrow. From birds it was applied to human beings, vagrants or beggars who live off scraps of food they pick up in the gutter snipes. Then thirdly, it was used particularly to describe teachers who, not having an original idea in their own heads, unscrupulously plagiarize from others, picking up scraps of knowledge from here and there, zealous seekers of the second rate at second hand, as one Bible translator and commentator put it, until their system is nothing but a ragbag of other people's ideas and sayings. Hence this ignorant plagiarist, this charlatan, the New English Bible renders it, this parrot, the Jerusalem Bible, this intellectual magpie. Others among the philosophers remarked, he seems to be advocating foreign gods, which was one of the charges brought against Socrates 450 years previously. They said this, Luke comments, because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. The word for gods here is daimonia, which did not always mean demons, but could also be used of lesser gods, in this case foreign divinities. It is possible that the philosophers, grasping that the essence of Paul's message was the Jesus and the resurrection, literal Greek, Jesus and the resurrection, thought that he was introducing into Athens a couple of new divinities, a male god called Jesus and his female consort, Anastasis. Chrysostom was the first to make this suggestion, and a number of commentators have followed him. F.F. Bruce goes further and writes, in the ears of some frequenters of the Agora, these two words sounded as if they denoted the personified and deified powers of healing and restoration. It is interesting, as Dr. Conrad Gempf has pointed out to me, that both Paul's speeches to pagans in the Acts seem to have been occasioned by a misunderstanding. The Athenians imagine two new gods, while the Lystrans think they are seeing two old ones. Could Luke be warning his readers of ways in which pagans misunderstand? Whatever the precise motive of the philosophers may have been, they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You're bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. That's Luke's comment on this tendency. The word Areopagus means literally the hill of Ares, or Ares, the Greek equivalent of Mars. So Mars Hill. Situated a little northwest of the Acropolis, it was formerly the place where the most venerable judicial court of ancient Greece met. For this reason, the name came to be transferred from the place to the court. By Paul's day, although cases were sometimes heard there, the court had become more a council, with its legal powers diminished. Its members were rather guardians of the city's religion, morals, and education. and it normally met in the royal porch of the agora. Two questions now face us. First, was Paul brought to the hill, or before the court council, or both? Various answers are given, but surely the expressions that he stood in the midst of the Areopagus and later went out from their midst would more naturally refer to people than to a place. It seems almost certain then that he addressed that august senate, and it does not matter much where the meeting took place. Secondly, was Paul's speech before the court of the Areopagus a defense or a sermon? Some students, especially those who consider his address to have been an inadequate presentation of the gospel, since the cross does not appear to have been central to it, try to protect Paul's reputation by arguing that he was defending himself, not preaching Christ. This is certainly a possibility, since the court did still have some judicial functions. In particular, it had jurisdiction over religion in the city, and since Paul was being accused of introducing new gods, it would have to take cognizance and adjudicate. So the statement in verse 19 that they took him could be translated, they took hold of him, in the sense of arresting him. But the case against this proposal is strong. The context is without a vestige of judicial process. There seemed to have been no legal charge, no prosecutor, no presiding judge, no verdict, and no sentence. At the same time, although Paul was not subjected to any formal interrogation, he was asked to give an account of his teaching. One may therefore regard the situation as an informal inquiry by the Education Commission, who regarded him with slightly contemptuous indulgence, so that he might either receive the freedom of the city to preach or be censored and silenced. Consequently, he told the court what he believed and taught, but in so doing made a quite personal statement of the gospel. As we have already seen, when Peter and John stood before the Sanhedrin, and as we shall see again in trial scenes in Jerusalem and Caesarea, the apostles seemed incapable of defending themselves without, at the same time, preaching Christ. As for Paul in Athens, it required an uncommon degree of courage to speak as he spoke, for it would be hard to imagine a less receptive or more scornful audience. So next time, the actual content of this great masterpiece of a sermon apparently improvised in Athens. I'll put a link into Paul in Athens, again, that brief series we did, our commentary from a Jehovah's Witness perspective of what Paul accomplished, the greatness of Paul's apologetic and the majesty of his theology even then. In a pagan context, without a script, apparently.